Good evening. My name is Graham Golden, and I've done a few talks on the My POV website before, speaking to a number of people that I've really learned loads from over the last few years when it comes to the subject of preventing violence. It's a topic that I feel very passionate about, and it's fantastic to have a group like My POV having the space to talk about some really important issues and issues that I think society wants to talk about and wants to talk about them more and more. There's so much going on in the media, nationally, internationally, and I think there's a lot of curiosity out there from society about learning more so they can do more out there. So first of all, thank you for My POV for hosting this session tonight. I'm a former police officer. And I spent 30 years in policing in Scotland, and the last years of my policing really starting to focus on bystander activation, bystander approaches, with a real focus on engaging boys and men in the prevention of violence and abuse. And tonight, I'm going to have a conversation with Dr. Alan Berkowitz, who for me is one of the world-leading academics who has this focus on preventing men's violence, bringing men into the conversation to give them a role in preventing men's violence against women and girls. And as I say, this is a topic I feel very, very strongly about, very passionate about. And for me, it's a topic that we need to think differently about. Whilst we need to focus on the bad behaviors we see that are taking place in society, for me, we need to have a more productive, a more positive conversation that bring men into the room. Let's invite men into these conversations. In my view, we need to get back to talking to men about their values. A lot has changed in the world over the last few years, decades, but I really believe that core values don't change that much. And I think if we can create the space for boys and men to talk about how they really, really feel, we can bring them, we can really make a difference out there. And that's what we're going to focus on tonight, is looking at social norms approaches, which I know Alan has this focus on. So listen, welcome Alan Berkowitz, 10 o'clock in the morning. To tell me, where are you speaking from today?
Good morning. So I'm in Northern California in the mountains near Oregon. I can see snow on the tops of the mountains out the window, and everything is green. So it's a beautiful day, and it's a wonderful opportunity to be talking to you, Graham. You're very passionate. I think we could interview you about this. I'm happy to share my point of view. It's not really my point of view, it's a point of view that I represent about how to engage men and boys in ending violence against women. So I'm very happy to be here. We know this is an important social issue, not only in Scotland and the UK, but all over the world. And actually, the good news is that we have an understanding of this issue, and we have some techniques for prevention that have been shown to be effective, and we want to disseminate those to all the folks who care about addressing this issue.
Yeah, so I think that leads on to my first question, really. Let's start hearing a bit more about your work, Alan, and why did you get involved in this field of work?
Sure. Well, first I'll just say, when I was younger, I used to feel a lot that I didn't belong. A lot of my not feeling belonging had to do with boys and how boys talked about girls, how boys talked about their sexual activity, bragging, the things that we know happen in certain, maybe not all cultures, but in many cultures. And what I didn't know that I know now is I was not in the minority. I
Yeah.
thought I was like the only guy who didn't fit. But part of my research is to show that most men are uncomfortable with the way they have been taught to be men, like maybe to not show your feelings, to never cry, to be unemotional. So that was like the genesis of me was not knowing how to relate to certain things in the culture. To make a long story short, I got a PhD in psychology. I was working in a college that had a particular focus on gender issues, and I started doing a lot of work with men. And actually, like many things in life, life presents you with something. It isn't really your great idea. Life presented me with the opportunity to work with a group of young men who wanted to talk about acquaintance rape, and we designed a program. And then another life opportunity, somebody gave me the results of a survey, and the survey they had asked about drinking. How much do you drink? How much do you think other people drink? And we found that everyone overestimated everyone else's drinking, that people didn't really drink as much as everyone thought they did. And when you thought that other people drank more than you drank more. So my work, and we call that the social norms approach. My work has to apply that approach of correcting misperceptions of norms to the issue of gender-based violence. So that's been my main professional focus, and obviously that's why we're here today.
Yeah, it's really interesting what you said there about being uncomfortable. You know, I felt the same as a young man. I didn't really start to understand it till I was in my 40s. Just quite, quite embarrassing to say. And I think there's a lot of men out there who, when they listen to this, if they're at my age or slightly younger, that I think they will relate to that. And, hopefully we can start to, I'm hopeful that we are having these conversations with younger men now, so they start to see these issues way before they're 40, so we can really help men get involved in this type of work. And why do you see, so my next question really is leading on from that, what I've just said there, is why do you see it's vital that we engage boys and men in this conversation to prevent violence against women and girls? Why is it so important?
Right. Well, that's obviously the key question, and there's a number of reasons for that. And by the way, we're not only talking about violence against women, we're not only talking about male and female, we're talking about any kind of injustice, but in particular, in at least in the Western countries, but probably throughout the world, most violence is committed by people who identify as male and is directed at people who identify as women, as well as other minoritized identities, sexual identities, and racialized identities. So the source of the problem is in the male identity, but most male don't commit the violence. The other thing, so we're not saying you're all bad, blah, blah, blah. We're saying you're all good. We want you to help us solve the problem. Or most of you are good. Some of you do bad things. There's two main reasons. One is the way boys and men are socialized is to care more about what other boys and men think. My self-esteem is based on what my friends think of me. That's what we call sexism. Why don't I care what girls think of me? Well, if I'm heterosexual and I'm interested in someone in particular, I might care about what she thinks of me. But if boys and men are socialized to feel that the opinions and perceptions of other boys and men about them are more important, then the group that has the most influence on the people who perpetrate these acts of violence is other boys and men. And we know that from the research. We know that boys and men who commit violence think that their friends are okay with what they do. And when you tell them that their friends aren't okay with what they do because their friends aren't, maybe some things their friends are okay with that I wouldn't be okay with or you wouldn't be okay with. But there's certain extremes that even their friends don't like. Maybe it's just to say like, hey, I don't really care what you did on the weekend. I don't want to hear the details of your sexual behavior with someone. When the men who do these things know that other men don't like it, they inhibit it. They don't do it. So the one thing is the biggest influence on boys and men is other boys and men. So that's the change agent. The other thing is the society that we've created around gender isn't good for boys and men either. It's not healthy for us. One of my colleagues, Harry Broad, who is a philosopher of men's studies, said, the disadvantages of the advantages of being a man. That's really important because I have a lot of benefits, right? My male appearance gives me certain benefits that I haven't earned, and we call that privilege. So I have benefits. I'm not going to say, oh, poor me, blah, blah, blah. I suffer all this injustice because even if I do, I have all these benefits. So it's the disadvantages of the advantages. And the disadvantages hurt us because we can't express our feelings. We inhibit ourselves. We're taught, boys don't cry. All these things we're told we're supposed to do. Guys are supposed to have a lot of sex to prove their masculinity. You worked in law enforcement, which is a very male cultural environment. There's certain things that we're taught. Now, obviously, I want police to protect me. I want you to be tough. I want you to have these qualities that are necessary to perform your role. But when they go to an extreme, they become unhealthy. So it's not only about doing what we feel is right and expressing our discomfort with inappropriate behavior. It's also healing ourselves from the effects of the way we were taught to be that isn't good for us.
Yeah. I think you make a point there. This work that we're doing, you're right. It's not just about focusing on men's violence against women and girls. It's about focusing on men's violence against other men, but also men's violence against themselves, as opposed to what you're saying, the benefits. Suicides globally 75% of suicides here in the UK involve boys and men. So really, if we can get men more involved in this conversation, what you're saying, Alan, is that we can start to make inroads into addressing these issues as well. Is that fair to say?
Yes, that is fair to say. You can't really separate the two because let's go talk about bystander behavior. So let's say I see something that really bothers me and I don't do something. Then I feel bad. I go home and I feel bad. Um, we could have a philosophical or a theological discussion. What's the part of Alan that feels bad? It's his superego. That's a psychological explanation. It's his values. It's his soul. There's a part of me that transcends my personality. However you want to, it's my conscience. However you want to explain it, there's a part of us that doesn't feel good when we do the wrong thing. And that part of me, I have to live with myself when I repeatedly do the wrong thing. That's not good for my health. Then if I'm taught that I can't express my emotions, I might start drinking too much, or I might be violent, or I might be aggressive. So it's all interrelated. And the act of doing the right thing is good for me because there's a part of me that wants me to do the right thing, that knows. And when I do a workshop with guys our age, men, let's say over 50,
Yeah.
men will come up and say, when I was 20 years old, this happened to me and I've never forgiven myself. And they're like carrying this for 30, 40 years. So, like in feminism, they say the personal is political and the political is personal. It's really true that they're not two separate domains. It's good for us to do the right thing, and it's bad for us to not do the right thing when we know we should and we don't.
Yeah, I think what you're alluding to there is like that moral trauma, that moral injury that I know from my work with bystanders, and you probably your research as well, is that we hold on to that. We feel really bad, especially when it comes to friends, I suppose, friends, colleagues, peers, which is really what I think the focus needs to be on known peer cultures. And before we start to look at what works to bring men into the conversation, what doesn't work, do you think, in your view? What are we getting wrong when it comes to talking to men?
It's not what I think, it's not Alan's point of view. It's what the research shows.
Yeah.
The research shows that scaring people doesn't work. If you do this, you go to jail. If you do this, then when Graham was a cop, he's going to bust you. If you smoke cigarettes, your lungs are going to turn black. You go to all these different countries and you have these scary pictures on the cigarettes about what's going to happen to you. People still smoke. So scaring people, making people feel, you're a bad guy. Real men don't do this. I'm not a real man. Now I feel bad. Scaring people doesn't work. Making them feel ashamed doesn't work. Telling them do the right thing doesn't work. Giving them information. If you do, X% of people are harmed by this and this and this. Those techniques don't work, and they're very common. It's like our first reaction is to show a scary picture of a battered woman if we want to address domestic violence. It's much better to focus on the positive. Most men don't like hearing their friends brag about their sexual exploits. Yeah. Most boys want to make sure they have consent before they have a sexual interaction. We've really learned in the prevention field, we call it the science of prevention. It's not Alan's point of view, that focusing on the positive empowers people to do positive things and inhibits people from doing negative things. Now, sometimes we need punishment. We need law enforcement. There's some people who are not, let's say, they've been so hurt in their own lives that they keep doing really harmful things to other people, and maybe some people need to be in jail, or some people, that's a whole other discussion. But we're not negating the fact that punishment has a role in all this, and that some people need to be contained for the benefit of others. We're talking about the overwhelming majority of people who really have an inclination to do the right thing, but don't know what to do. And even when they want to do the right thing, they don't, because they don't have the skills or the understanding to do it, which is why we teach bystander intervention. We teach ways to intervene effectively.
Yeah, today I was in Glasgow, and there was a poster on the wall in a railway station which talked about the crime of revenge porn, so sharing images unconsensually. And and in the bold letters, the big letters were, revenge porn is wrong, and in tiny letters at the bottom was, if you see something, do something. So the
So
focus was
like
on.
so I'm going to come visit you, and we're going to go in the subway, right? And we're going to see this poster. It's like, so what am I supposed to do? I already know it's wrong, and I don't know what to do. So it doesn't help. The only benefit of a poster like that is if people aren't aware of the issue of revenge porn.
Yeah,
But let's say I'm doing revenge porn, okay? And then I find out that all my friends don't like it, and they disrespect me, and they think that it diminishes me in their eyes. That's what's going to get me to not do it. Because,
yeah,
and also, now here's the perfect opportunity to talk about the two sides of the coin. I was in a relationship, and the relationship ended, and I can't deal with my feelings,
yeah,
right? I'm hurt. I'm upset. I feel I was dissed. I feel I was betrayed. Whatever I feel, those are valid emotions. How am I going to express them? What opportunity does society give me as a man to go to you, Graham? I would never, I mean, I'm being stereotypical now.
yeah, yeah.
I
I
would
know.
never go tell a cop my feelings, right? That's the stereotype. So instead of say, Graham, I'm really hurting. Like, could we go out and have a beer? My relationship broke up. I'm depressed. I don't know what to do with myself. I'm not supposed to tell you that. So then where do I go with my feelings? I need to express my feelings. I need to do something with my feelings. So I
Yes.
take it out on her or
Yeah,
him, whatever my relationship
yeah,
is.
yeah,
So you see how the two sides of the coin
yeah.
are
Interesting.
together.
Yeah. No, it just, following your work over the last few years, I look at things so differently. I look at the negative and think, oh no, in my view, bad news sells stories, it sells books, it sells academic research sometimes, and we need to balance them. We can't ignore the bad acts that we see in society, but we need to, yeah, as you say, focus a bit more on the positive. And that brings me into this sort of this idea of what works. And I think I'd like you to try and describe in a not try and describe if you can describe in a simplistic way for the people watching this social norms approach.
Okay, so first,
Yeah, go for it.
so first, let's just go back to the poster, the revenge porn poster. Who paid for it? Who commissioned it? Who designed it?
Mm,
So the person who's paying for it, let's say it's a Glasgow City, whatever, they need to have standards of what's effective. They need to say, we won't give you money if you use fear, if you do this. Then maybe the person who designed it was like an advertising executive. They don't know anything about prevention. So we're talking about creating a system that has a sophistication to do things that work.
yeah,
So now to go to your question. If I, if when I was 17, I didn't like hearing guys brag about their sexual exploits or talking about women's bodies in detail, I thought I was the only one. If we went back, or we can do it now because it's happening now, and we survey all the guys in that room and we say, does it bother you when another guy brags about his sexual exploits? Most guys will say yes. Then we say, do you think most other guys in your group, in your room, in the precinct, are uncomfortable when a guy brags about his sexual exploits? And most guys will say no.
yeah,
So we call that a misperception. The majority is uncomfortable, and the majority thinks it's a minority. There's a fancy word for that called pluralistic
yeah,
ignorance.
yeah,
Now, if you read the academic research, there's pluralistic ignorance about environmental issues, about charitable giving, about driving fast, about whether or not you catch a fish and you put it back because it's too small. The human reality is saturated with misinformation about other people because we're used to only seeing the extreme. We're used to only hearing the extreme. We only read about the extreme. So we don't know that most people don't agree with something and they agree with us. What happens when I think I'm in the minority? I'm quiet. I don't want to like ruin the party. I don't want to say something that's going to embarrass me in front of my friends. So I'm quiet. So then the question is what works? Like you're asking me what to do. Talk to your friends. When you went to the precinct and you were getting ready, you were getting suited up and ready to go out on the streets or in the patrol car, whatever you did, and I kept saying things that were really offensive to you. Ask the other guys, what do you think about Alan's jokes? I think sometimes you can be really subtle. You could say, I think sometimes he goes a little over the line, even though you think I go way over the line. Yeah, that's true. And then you find out you have buddies who agree with you and that you're not alone. So then you decide who's the best person to talk to Alan.
Yeah.
Well, I'm new on the force. I don't want to say anything. He's like an old timer. I don't want to get in trouble with him. So I'll talk to him. I've been here 20 years. I'll tell him, he thinks he's being funny, but it isn't working. He's a great cop. We love him. But you see what I'm saying? And when we do this, when we do a workshop, which is what I've designed workshops that have shown to reduce men's violence, you have these discussions in a small group with your peers.
Yeah.
So then the guy who tells the jokes hears his friends saying that they don't like it when someone tells jokes. Or they think it's really important to make sure you have consent before you have sex with someone. Or just because someone takes off some of their clothing and is very passionate doesn't mean they want to have intercourse with you. So there's all these myths that are in people's heads that are leading them to do wrong things, and we need to correct that misinformation. And the best way to do it is in a small group that's interactive where you hear from your peers.
Yeah.
But you could also do it in a poster. You could go in the Glasgow subway and have a poster that says 90% of Glasgow men think revenge porn is the wrong way to share your feelings when someone breaks up with you.
Yeah.
But then you have to say, well, what can you do? You need to give an alternative.
Yeah.
They did a very interesting study in Ecuador, in Quito. It was in Colombia. They put a poster saying, if you're committing domestic violence, here's a hotline. Call us. We'll help you not do it. And all these, they were surprised. They got flooded with calls of men who were abusive, and they didn't feel good about their abuse. And they needed someone to help them. And they had these really well-trained people on the phone to talk to them and help them work through. But there's many, many things we can do. And there's not any one thing that we could do. Like, I'm not a good business person. I never invented anything to sell. I don't have a program to sell you because it's not any one thing. And if we're going to do this in Scotland, we have to do it differently than we do it in California. So we need to adapt. So I'm really, in an informal way, I'm going through what is best practices, which it needs to be tailored to the audience. It needs to be focused on peers. It needs to include correction of misperception of norms, which is social norms, and then it needs to teach people how to intervene effectively in a way that's safe and comfortable and that works, which is a separate discussion, different ways of intervening. But we don't tell people you should do something or else, or if you say something, do something. What am I supposed to do? Give me 10 choices and then I'll pick one.
Yeah.
But just to tell me I need to do something.
Yeah, that's really, so one thing you're saying there is that social norms approaches provide reassurance that I'm not just the only one who thinks this. Other people, and then that gives you allies that you can then ask for help, I suppose. But also what you're saying there, Alan. Yeah, go for it.
You introduced in the beginning the idea of values, right?
Yeah.
You talked about values.
Yeah.
We already have values.
I know.
Maybe when we're born, we could have an argument about whether or not someone has values, but they even do these little studies with infants where infants show compassion and infants have all these values that we thought, that weren't there. But the point is we all have values, so we're affirming those values and other people share those values. Like, I'll give you a different example of an interesting social norm study. They were trying to do something about early childhood marriage in small villages in Africa, of girls getting married off when they're like 12 or 13. And it turns out most of the fathers wanted their daughters to have an education. That was a value. But they thought they were the only one. So they did it differently because it was a very different environment. They said, if we find out that a majority of men in your village are willing to say that they don't want their daughters getting married so young, would you say that? Oh yeah, but I'll only say it if most guys say it. So they went around and secretly collected a majority of the men agreeing, and then they had a party, and they all said, we want our daughters to go to school. So it's like you have to figure out the right way to do it in the environment that you're in.
Yeah,
but it works.
Yeah, listen, I've read so much research that you've been involved in and other academics have been involved in, which says this works and we need to be doing more of this. And I spoke to you recently about the campaign that I supported last year, the That Guy campaign. And you've seen the film, you've seen the website, and thank you for your compliments about about the way that has been pulled together. I was at a meeting, an advertising agent today, and we're looking at part two. Where do we need? Because that first part of the campaign focused on that idea that sexual violence starts long before you think it does. It took the conversation to boys and men about language, behaviors that we've talked a lot today about how lots of boys and men are uncomfortable with hearing these things. And now I've convinced them to focus on what we've just talked about there, which is about, okay, how do we reassure that they're not just the only one who wants to do more, but importantly, what do they do? So what's your views? Where do we need to take that for part two in many ways?
So let's share a little something from the research. When someone is a bystander, they see something that makes them feel uncomfortable. That's a normal human experience. After you see the poster, while you're waiting for the train, you get in the train and you see something uncomfortable. You go to the supermarket, you see something uncomfortable. Someone says something at work, someone in your family. So we feel uncomfortable. The first step is to notice the event. Maybe people don't notice revenge porn. Yeah. So how do we make a poster that acknowledges the problem? The campaign you did is perfect in teaching men to notice the event. Yeah. This happens. I've even done it. It shouldn't be happening, but there's a lot of it. I didn't realize there was so much of it. So the first step is to notice the event and interpret it as a problem. So now we've succeeded in doing that. But now I need to feel responsible for dealing with it and know what to do. That's the next step. So how do we go to that next step? So the next step, and as we're saying, if let's say, if the police commissioner decides that we have to have these workshops for guys for cops, men and women who are cops in the precinct, to understand the social norm. Most of us are uncomfortable when we see this. This isn't good for the force. And then you go out in the subway and you see a poster that says, 90% of men don't like it. Then you're getting two mutually reinforcing inputs. So we want to create a total environment of mutually reinforcing inputs, because it isn't any one thing that works. And then maybe the kid, a younger, goes to school and the teacher says something, and then the parents talk to them about it when they come home, because the parents got it in a newsletter. So we want to create mutually reinforcing things. But we're talking about bystander. We have to give people something to do. We need to teach them, you could do this, 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 or this. So what is it? You could confront the person. I could say, Graham, I really don't like it when you talk that way. Could you please not do it in front of me? But I might not, because maybe I have a feeling I could tell you that if we were friends, because we are very open with each other. We have an easy back and forth. So sometimes you could say, like, that's not okay. You need to do that if you have authority. When you were in uniform, if you didn't do that, you were condoning it. Because if I see something that isn't okay, and I see that you see it and you don't do anything, you're enabling it. So confrontation is necessary when you have authority or when you feel comfortable using confrontation. Then there's what we call indirect intervention, where you just create a distraction. You see something on the subway and it looks really creepy, and you yell, the police are coming. The police aren't coming, but you break it up. Or, you're at a party and someone's getting another person really drunk and it makes you nervous what's going to happen. And you go tell the guy, I say, Graham, your car's being towed. So now I extract you from that situation where you're doing something that isn't okay. So we can teach distraction. We can teach people to say something positive when they say something negative. So in the UK, like in the US, we have this whole controversy about immigration. So someone makes a negative comment about immigrants and you say, oh, really, my accountant is from India and he's like the best accountant I've ever had in 50 years. You replace, it could be, anything. You replace a negative comment, which has a certain assumption behind it, with a positive comment that contradicts the assumption. Or you could say, really, I'd like to know why, I'd like to understand why you think immigrants are bad for Scotland. Mm-hmm. So then we have a conversation. And then I say, well, really, that's interesting because my experience is this. And, I give an alternate point of view. It's my POV in a conversation. And what happens is when you're willing to talk to someone and listen to them, then they're willing to listen to you.
Yeah.
And then you shift. So the point is now I know I have all these different things I could do. And I go into a situation and I feel uncomfortable and I say, oh, I'll do that one. But before you didn't tell me what to do. You just told me to do something and I didn't know what to do.
It's a great point. You know, but at the start of that answer, you took us through I think John Darley's stages of intervention. You know, that you notice, responsibility, and then act. And you know, we first spoke. You know, the last time we spoke was about 2 weeks ago, and I was talking about, you know, tools for men. And I remember reading one of your papers years ago, and you described the concern for the harasser. And I replaced it with that term that my wife told me a few years ago: connect before correct. You know, your eyes lit up when you heard that: connect before correct. What does that communicate to you, and how can we use that in bystander intervention?
Okay, so first of all, you could say that negative behavior is the problem, is the result of humans feeling disconnected from each other.
Yeah,
Because if I felt connected to you, I wouldn't want to offend you.
yeah,
And if we had a good connection, you'd say, like, Alan, please don't, whatever. So connection is important. And also, when you have a relationship with someone, the context is different. So we want to have a connection. And for instance, let's say that you respect me and you think I'm very competent in my professional work, but I'm doing something that makes you uncomfortable. You can say to me, Alan, I really respect you and you do all these great things, but probably you don't realize when you do this,
yeah,
it might give a different impression than you realize. And I don't want people to not respect you because I think you're great. So you're giving me feedback in a way that's positive. It's as you told me with law enforcement and bystander intervention. If I correct you, if I report you, I'm not being disloyal and hurting the force. I'm actually being loyal and keeping you from getting in worse trouble because you could end up losing your job. So
yes,
we need to reframe
yeah.
the context and we need to give people a positive motivation to act on their positive motivation.
Yeah, I think, you know, we talk a lot in this work, we talk a lot about reasons why people don't act. And what I've learned in the last few years is, how do we motivate people, that sense of responsibility? You know, I remember reading the research around the Stanley Milgram experiment, you know, all those numbers of people that pressed the electrocution tree, the triple X button. But I was fascinated with the 35% of people who didn't press the 450 volt button. And what they suggested was a sense of responsibility. And it's about how do we use that sense of that friendship. Friends don't let friends drive drunk was the peer intervention campaign from the US. For me, friends don't let friends sexually harass women. Friends don't let friends carry knives or weapons. Friends don't let friends struggle with their mental health. It's that,
Right.
isn't it?
Cops don't let, I don't know, do you say cops in Scotland?
Yeah.
Cops don't let other cops, break the rules.
Yeah. No,
So
it's fascinating what we're talking about there. You know, that idea where we can use our friendships, we can use our connections with people to have a non-judgmental, a non-shaming conversation with a good friend. You know, we can separate the person from the behavior, can't we? They're still my friend, and I'm not being a good friend in being loyal to them. So, you know, I think that you've reassured me lots of things there about what I've been talking today with this, looking at this next phase of the campaign, the focus on the positive. We've talked a lot there in this first part of our conversation, we need to maintain the focus on the poor behaviors, the abusive behaviors we see in society, but we need to think about a balance, looking at the positive, the pro-social behaviors, the good stuff that boys and men are doing out there.
exactly, because the good thing about the campaign is you got people's attention.
We did.
So that's good. Advertisers are very good at getting people's attention, but what do you do with people's attention? So let me give you an example. There was a study that showed that negative political campaigning gets people's attention, and then they're less likely to vote.
Right.
So what good did we do? I want you to vote for me. If you and I are both running for mayor of Glasgow and I say all these bad things about you, and I dredge up all this stuff from your past, and I get it all in the newspapers, and I think, great, now I'm getting all this attention, and then people don't vote at all. So we both lose.
Yes.
So the next part of the campaign would be to focus, because see, here's a problem with social scientists. Here's a problem with people like me who have PhDs. And we're a product of the larger society. We only look at the negative. We, we talk about all the negative things. How many times a day in the city of Glasgow or anywhere in the world do people do a sensitive, caring, compassionate thing towards another person?
Mm.
Millions, thousands. Do we have data on that?
No.
Do we have data on how many times a woman has experienced a man interrupting a sexist remark that made her uncomfortable, or a person of color? You know, like what they call like just acts of kindness.
Yeah.
We don't have statistics on that. But I bet now if you go and interview men on when they actually did something, you would get these amazing, inspiring stories that
Yeah.
would inspire other people. So that's how we want to do this. But
Yeah.
then you'll also find people saying, "Well, this happened, and I don't know what to do."
Yeah.
So we have responsibility to tell them what they could do, and then let them decide what they're going to do, because it really depends on their personality, their culture, the situation, the power differential. If I'm a racialized person or a minoritized person, there's so many. If I'm small, if I'm a big person, I might feel comfortable going up to you and saying something. And if I'm really tiny, I might be afraid, who knows? But the point is, we don't tell anyone what to do. We
Yeah.
say, I know you want to do something. Here's the menu. You decide what works for you.
Yeah.
We
Thank you
have to
for
have a
that.
good menu, right?
Yeah,
We have to
yeah,
have a good,
yeah, a menu of options, a suite of options, a toolkit in many ways. So
right.
thank you for that. So I suppose for the remaining part of our conversation, and I'm loving this. This is just this. I'm just in heaven, mate. I love this type of conversation. I think it's really productive.
Me too. Me too.
I want to take our conversation to specifically look at policing. My past organization, and I want to talk about it from a place of support. I really support my organization. I'm loyal to policing. But over these last couple of years in the US, we had the George Floyd murder in Minneapolis, a serving police officer who murdered, he's in jail, murdered George Floyd, in spite of three other police officers, being there and not doing anything. And these officers now have been found guilty for not intervening, and they will go to jail for 10, 15 years. Here in the
And not only
UK,
that, the perpetrator had a history of doing terrible
yes,
things that was repeatedly that was never addressed.
and that's a good point, because here in the UK, we had a serving police officer from London, the Metropolitan Police Officer, who was convicted of murdering a lady, Sarah Everard. And yes, when you looked at the background, his nickname, he was called the Rapist. That was his nickname. And so that suggests there was behaviors and attitudes that were in the past. So for me, the question is, how would active bystander training support policing, do you think? And how could we use like social norms approaches within a policing context?
Right. So first of all, I'm like you. I want to support and appreciate and validate our law enforcement.
Yeah.
We could have certain debates like, should we spend less money on law enforcement and more on social services? Because if we spent more money on social services, maybe you wouldn't have to go into so many nasty emergencies. But we still need law enforcement, and most people in law enforcement are good people who are trying to do the right thing. But we have a culture that allows these people, the two examples you gave,
Mm.
right, the cop in London and in Minnesota, that allows certain individuals to do horrible things over and over and over again and not be held accountable. So we need to change that culture.
Yeah.
If you're a farmer and your crops aren't growing, maybe you don't have the right nutrition in the soil, right? You need to have the environment support the behaviors that you want. So I'm sure if we went back to either of those police departments and interviewed the people who were on the force for a long time, They would say, I was always uncomfortable with Alan's behavior. When Alan talked this way, I didn't like it. When I saw this, I didn't like it. Well, why didn't you do anything? Because there's a barrier. I want to do something, but I don't. So what's the block? We need to remove the block. One of the blocks is I'll be seen as disloyal. So what you're telling me now is we're not saying you're being disloyal, you're actually being more loyal. Because if you had intervened with him 15 years ago, he wouldn't be in jail now.
Yeah.
Or maybe he wouldn't be on the police force because he wouldn't change his behavior. And he thinks he got ripped off and he got a raw deal, but he doesn't realize that it's better to lose your job than to go to jail for 40 years. Mm-hmm. Then we need to say, well, I didn't know what to do because he's a sergeant and I'm just new on the force. So then so it's a whole complex of different interventions that all together, and it's also leadership, because we know that the biggest predictor of sexual harassment in the workplace is leadership. And if leadership is seen as not caring, then sexual harassment is more likely to flourish. Well, how many times in a workplace environment or a law enforcement environment is someone's behavior brought to the attention of the leaders and then they're perceived as not doing anything? Yeah. They might have done something, but we don't know about it. So we need to find a way to tell people, look, even though I can't tell you what we did to Alan, I could tell you that last year, 6 officers were reprimanded for these behaviors and the consequences range from this and this. So we need to have a sense that if I say something, someone else will do something. So it's really a very systematic thing. It's not, that's why, you see people who are trying to sell you the magic pill to solve a problem. And it's like, there is no magic pill, but there's a lot of things altogether that we could do over time that will make a difference.
Yeah. So interesting you're saying there about leadership. I've in the last couple of days I've been speaking to Frank Serpico on Twitter, and we're now striking up a nice relationship. And for those young people watching this today, Frank Serpico was the New York police officer who blew the whistle on corruption back in the 1960s and 1970s. Al Pacino played him in a movie back, I think, in the 1970s as well. And he talks about that idea that, leadership not taking this stuff seriously is going to lead to apathy, that learned helplessness within organizations, people not speaking up. But for me, active bystandership, if we get this right, officers will be intervening way before it becomes the big issue. And we probably won't even hear about it.
That's the idea.
That's the idea, isn't it?
The leadership has to set the tone.
Yes.
In action. Because maybe I'm the best leader and I really care about all these things and I really have the right mindset, but you don't know that.
Yeah.
And you work for me. I have to demonstrate in action, like, hey, this isn't okay. We don't talk this way here.
Yeah.
We respect our female officers.
Yeah.
If you want to get promoted, here's what I expect of you. And by the way, these things need to be included in promotion. The military in the US now is including in the promotion of officers whether or not their subordinates believe they take this issue seriously.
Yeah.
So that means I better demonstrate to you that I take this issue seriously. So now I'm creating the environment. And if you have to intervene with me, and we know that, and I think the chief doesn't give a hoot about this, and most guys agree with me and don't agree with you, I'm not going to listen to you. But if I know that most guys agree with you and another guy says to me, hey, Alan Graham's right, like you're going to get in trouble if you keep doing that. And then I see somebody got in trouble and then I see my chief say something that I would get in trouble, that's potent.
Yeah.
But it's all of that together.
Yeah.
It's not one thing. I went to a conference and somebody had a table and say, we end sexual violence. And I really wanted to go up to them and say, like, are you kidding me? Like, are you think one thing that maybe what you're doing is great, but that's not enough. It needs to be many things.
Yeah. I just, just to bring that part to this interview to a conclusion is that you mentioned as well, that sense of loyalty, for me, my view, what needs to be part of a training, an active bystander training for policing is looking at some of the key skills that policing has already. Loyalty. We're loyal to each other, right? But that needs to include say, hey, Alan, that's wrong. What you're doing. It's that honest, critical loyalty, teamwork as well. Also go, for me, it also needs to go back to, why did you join the police? To help people. Okay, so let's extend that
You
to,
didn't join the police to make a lot of money, right?
no, not at all. Not at all. But it's helping people.
That's sad, isn't that sad?
Yeah, and it's also about you realizing that helping people includes helping your colleagues. I want you to go home tonight. I want you to have a job in a year's time, and I'm being loyal to you. And anything else you think we need to be including in this, that's going to help us activate, motivate bystanders? What do you think? What would you be your tip for something that will really motivate men, particularly men in policing, because that's what we're talking about in the main. But what would be the big thing that would motivate bystanders, do you think, that we could focus on?
I think we've covered the range of things that are involved in a successful intervention that is based on science. I think we need to understand what the barriers are.
Yeah.
So somebody needs to say, Alan, when we were going out for a beer and Graham said X, Y, and Z, what did you think? Oh, I thought that was terrible. Well, why didn't you say anything? Because of this, this, and this. So now we have to remove the barriers. So it's very situation specific, but we know that in the law enforcement context, there are very specific barriers that kept people from doing the right thing that they wanted to do. So we have to remove those barriers and we have to change the cultures. And going to the other side of the coin, the two extreme perpetrators who are in jail in London and the Twin Cities in Minnesota, they didn't perceive any barriers to inhibit them from doing what they were doing.
Yeah, it's a good point.
So it's very look, I could come to Scotland and we could design a great program for law enforcement, and each precinct is different. Each city's different.
I know.
Supervisor's different. You have to tailor it to the environment. But the good news, that is maybe a good way to conclude, is we have the tools and we understand the problem, and there are people like you who are doing it and showing that it works.
Yeah. I think for me, just to end there, that I often quote Erwin Staub, the psychologist, violence and abuse will evolve and continue until we have interruption. And that for me is key. How do we interrupt it? And the earlier we interrupt it, the less harm is being caused to people, communities, and the profession of law enforcement. Listen, Alan, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you today. I have really enjoyed speaking to you. You're a person that inspires me. Your research is just, anybody, go and check out Alan Berkowitz's work. He's there. His research is there to read. Get in touch with him. You'll find him on the web. Lovely, lovely guy. And hopefully, Alan, one day, we'll meet. We can. I'm keen to get out to California, and that might be happening later this year or next year. Fingers crossed.
It also has to be mutual.
Yes.
I have to come to Scotland. But
that'd be.
And by the way, people like me don't have any value without people like you.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that?
Because I can write all these great articles and do all this great research, but if nobody's using it, so maybe I could get promoted and get tenured professorship or something, or get a grant, but it doesn't have any value unless it's we have this terrible language. You say it's so academic. That means it's detached from reality. It should be the opposite. So I'm excited. I'm passionate. I'm so delighted to talk to you because you're using it. That's what gives it its value.
Thank you for that. And you're right. There's 50, 60 years, if not more, research there that says we can train people to be active bystanders, good friends in some respects. Thank you, Alan, for your time, and have a great day, and continue your great work.
I have one advantage. I have 8 more hours in the day left. So thank you very much.
The future's quite nice, actually. It's nice here in Scotland. Great. Thank you.